All praises, honor, and glory be to the Heavenly Father, in the name of His only begotten Son, and the Holy Spirit. Allah, Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Dash. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone, and salutations to you, sincere brothers, faithful and diligently pushing this truth with fear and trembling through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai. This is the book of Exodus, chapter 15, verse 3. The Lord Yahweh is a man of war. The Lord Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai is his name. The book of Revelations chapter 19, starting at verse 11. And I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. And he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True. And the one sitting upon the white horse, called Faithful and True, is our Lord Yahweh Shai, whom the world ignorantly knows as Jesus Christ. And it says, in righteousness he doth judge and make war. And in righteousness he doth judge and make war. His eyes was as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. And he had a name written that no man knew but he himself. And he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood. And his name is called the Word of Yahweh Power. And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations. And he shall rule them with a rod of iron. And he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of the Almighty Yahweh Power. Verse 16. And he had on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Lord, will this lesson be edifying? Shalom.
Be mindful of everything. You know that we living in the last days. I can pretty much say literally, because it's a matter of days before this place goes down. Whether it's 300 days, 250 days, 500 days, 600 days. Keep your eyes open. And be mindful of things that you say. As far as the scriptures are concerned, when you do your videos, you know, Esau is looking for any excuse to strike your video and take down your page. And when they give you a strike, you can't put up videos for whatever, how many months, 3 months or whatever. So they're watching us, they're watching everybody on the web. They're coming down hard on the web. So you know, basically just teach the scriptures. When you teach, go into the scriptures. Anyway, I noticed I put in, I was watching Apostle Aram Lab's latest video that he did on various topics. And he had mentioned, he spoke about in the beginning of the video about Joe Biden swearing in on the Bible. So I did a little research on the Bible, and that, I guess that's it is a family Bible that goes back to the early 1800s. It's a Catholic Bible because he's a Catholic. And the Apostle Ramlab said that he swore in on the Bible, which condemns the sin of man with man and woman. And then the first thing he does is he reverses the order or the executive order or the decision of Trump, saying you can't be openly gay. So what he did was he went right back to what Obama, the order that Obama put out when he was in his administration, that you can you can be a transsexual, transvestite, transgender, you can be a homosexual, you can be a lesbian. It shows you a lot about Obama and this guy Biden to bring something like that back, where you can openly be those things, which is clearly against the scriptures. The scriptures speak about woe to the hypocritical nation. This is a hypocritical nation, and that's why it's going to be destroyed. Anyway, I said, let me go and see what Bible did Kamala Harris swear in on. And this is what I found out. Oh, she's definitely an insider. They're both insiders. You got this guy, Joe Biden, which he's been a career politician for almost 50 years, for more years than a lot of you were even born. So, you go up the ranks from state senator or community worker to mayor to governor to senator and he's going up the ranks. He's going up the ranks. Oh, he was the one that made the statement back in 2005 before Obama came into office. He told Justice Roberts, and that's all over YouTube. If you put in Biden, Justice Roberts, and the microchip or whatever, you put those combination of words in, and you'll get a whole bunch of clips of about a minute and change long, of him saying that you will rule on whether people can receive. I forget exactly how he said it, word for word, but he said you will rule as to whether people will get chips. And I believe he said in their heads, in their brain chips, which is a fulfillment of Revelation chapter 13, the mark of the beast. And so when we hear at Great Millstone, the leadership and then the brothers down the line saw that, we already identified that with they already know. So we're talking about 2005. And then he told Justice Roberts that before your tenure is over, before you retire or die, because a Supreme Court justice is a justice until they retire or drop dead. So they're justice for life. So he said in his lifetime that he's going to rule on that. And it was Joe Biden that said that. As a senator, clearly an insider. But anyway, you got Kamala Harris, which is married to a so-called Jew. So you know how she feels about Jake men. I mean, Barack Obama couldn't get away with that. If he had an Edomite wife, man, a black woman, come against him quick. But ain't no so-called black woman that I heard of have criticized her for, dealing with a so-called white man. But when a brother does it, it's a problem. And you men out there, you deal with these women. You know what women I'm talking about? They're the enemy, man. They're the straight up enemy. Anyway, I believe that's her husband holding the book for her to swear in on. And it looks like two Bibles, but they're saying that it was a purse on top of the brown Bible, as you can see in the picture. And this is what it says. Let me and if I remember, I'll leave the link in the description box. It says the claim. Hold up. Okay, fact check. Vice President Kamala Harris used two Bibles when she was sworn in. Okay, it looks like two Bibles, a black one on top of a brown one. So I don't know if she actually used two Bibles, but this is what it said. That's why you got to watch everything. You got to watch the key words, things that these people say, and what do they mean when they say it, because they speak in code. You know, to the general public, they're hearing words, everyday words, but when these people speak, they speak in code, man. When they make these movies based upon conspiracies, they're telling you in the movie that we're planning on doing this and we're planning on doing that, and the average person, American, watches it like it's entertainment. Excuse me. We here at Great Millstone, from the leadership on down, when we go watch a movie, we decipher or extrapolate, pull out what we think might be hidden codes in the movie. And see, Jake doesn't do that. Jake doesn't do that. So it says, the claim, Vice President Kamala Harris did not place her hand on the Bible while being sworn in. After Vice President Kamala Harris' historic swearing in on January 20th, and let's say she did put her hand on two Bibles. It's not the thing where she didn't want to touch the Bible. We don't know. We got to do more. You know, we got to do more checking. But let's say she did do that. Well, that's a hypocritical act anyway, because in the scriptures that you got your hand on, it says in two places. Well, it says in the New Testament in two places, in James, the 5th chapter, and I believe that's the 12th verse, and Matthew's 5 verse 34, if I'm not mistaken. You can fact check me on it. I'm not going to go to it because we'll make this quick. See, those are basic scriptures. I don't have to open them up and read it like I'm Alexander Scorby. Anyway, it says after Vice President Kamala Harris' historic swearing in on January 20th, social media users started circulating claims that Harris purportedly refused to rest her hand on the Bible while taking the oath of office. Like I said, what it looks like is a black Bible on top of a brown Bible. Why would you use two Bibles? I don't know. Anyway, it says she did not place her hand on the Bible, as you can clearly see when she was inaugurated while being sworn in. A purse wallet is on top of that Bible, a Facebook user wrote. The post included a photo of Harris placing her hand on a black object on the top of a thick copy of the Bible. The post has been shared more than 400 times. USA Today has reached out to the user for comment. Harris uses two Bibles. Harris used two Bibles to be sworn in on January 20th, USA Today reported. One Bible belonged to the late civil rights icon and Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. who helped inspire. So they're saying that it was two Bibles, help inspire her career path. The second Bible belonged to family friend Regina Shelton, whom Harris called a second mother to her and her sister. It goes on to say, Mrs. Shelton would bring her Bible to church every Sunday, sitting alongside her. I was introduced to the teachings of that Bible, Harris wrote in a Bustle article in 2019. So according to the USA Today, she did actually put her hands on a Bible, two Bibles, one honoring Thurgood Marshall and the other honoring a woman by the name of Shelton. But now, so let's go with that. She actually put her hands on two Bibles instead of one. But in the scriptures, it clearly states that you're not supposed to swear on anything. And anything that Biden, any executive orders, any decisions, any rulings that he makes, any actions that he takes, the vice president is in agreement with that. So she's also in agreement with the fact that in the military, you can be openly, gay, and you can be transgender and so forth. So, I'm just, thinking out loud. A couple of scriptures came to me. I'm not going to give you a whole list of a bunch of scriptures, but bottom line is the scriptures say watch and also pray, and you got to pray more. You got to pray more. You got to study more. You got to meditate more. The scriptures say give diligence to make that calling and election sure. And another reason why we watch and we're mindful is because we're the heralds. And when you look up the word heralds, that's another way of saying prophets. We're to see what's going on so we can tell the people, which are the rest of the elect, what's coming down the road. As we here at Great Millstone been telling you since we got on YouTube more than 10 years ago, that the mark of the beast is in fact the microchip. This vaccination, don't take it. We done told you that. We let you know where we stand on everything that's of importance. The scriptures say in Ezekiel, the 3rd chapter, warn them. Isaiah 58, starting at the first verse, says, curse Jake out. We were sent to these people for a reason. The Most High chose us before we were on this earth. He chose us in the spiritual realm to do what we're doing right now. Oh, and I want to say this, since it came to my mind, there's a video put up concerning Romans, the 13th chapter. Now, Romans, the 13th chapter is talking about the Roman authorities and that you're under their rule. Now, if they tell you to do something that's against the scriptures, then you go against it. But when Paul spoke about that in Romans, the 13th chapter, the first couple of verses, he was talking about the current rulership. The Most High set up this current rulership. And how do we prove that? You can read Daniel the 2nd chapter, and you can read Daniel 7th chapter, where it speaks about a 4th beast. So who set up the first beast, which is the Babylonians, the 2nd beast, Medo-Persians, the 3rd beast, the Greeks, the 4th beast, the Roman Empire, and the revival of the 4th beast, the Roman Empire, which is America and the EU and NATO. The Most High set them up, so they're in the rulership. So we're not to try to take this system down, because this is the Most High set them up to play their part. It says anybody that resists the powers, which is the Roman Empire, during Paul's time, shall receive to themselves damnation. Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise in the same. And it goes on to say that he beareth not the sword in vain, which that sword was given to Esau. The Romans descended from Edomites. Some more proof. The Apostle Paul, he went before Felix, and he went before one of the Herodians. I believe that was one of the Agrippas, who said, thou almost madest me to be a Christian, meaning a follower of Yahushua. And then ultimately he went into the ears of the Caesar at that time, which was Nero. Now we know who Nero is, or should be. And it was Nero that condemned Peter and Paul and the rest of the 12, except for John, because the Most High preserved his life so he can receive the revelations on the Isle of Patmos. Now what happened was, the Apostle Paul made a statement that his departure draweth nigh, meaning he was going to die, because we're going to sentence you. So he obeyed it. He was found guilty in the eyes of the Roman authorities, and he was found guilty of sedition. The Apostle Peter was found guilty of sedition. Claudius banished the Israelites in Rome because they were guilty of sedition. They were calling for the place to be destroyed. Because when we're saying that there's going to be a covenant, a world that's coming, that's sedition. But our justification is that the Most High, which is over you, is coming to destroy you. But guess what? It's still sedition, because that's how they looked at it. You know, they looked at Paul and Peter as they're going to build up an army and then physically take down the Roman Empire. They never said that. They spoke about how the Lord, Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua, is going to come back. And they didn't understand, when you go to Acts, the 1st chapter, they thought Yahushua, after he died and rose, that they was going to live in the kingdom 2,000 years ago. They didn't realize that they had to go through hardcore slavery. They didn't realize that they had to suffer Deuteronomy 28 chapter and the curses found in the scriptures. And then during that time, there was no fulfillment of the mark of the beast and the rest of the book of Revelation. See, this is why people can't get into this book, and people bug out when they try to learn this truth. A lot of people through the years. A lot of people bugged out. A lot of people fell out and tried to do their own thing, and some people went back into the church. Some people just went back to doing the worldly shit that they did, and some tried to set up their own thing, and they had their own Hebrew version of the Hebrew Israelite thing. But then they're like new wine in old bottles. So what we gave them, it didn't stay within them. Anyway, I'm gonna say shalom.
All right. I'd like to start off by saying Barakateh Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rachakodash. All right. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is Circumcision and Uncircumcision. And this is pretty much based off of a question that a brother had asked on the comment board. So Lorenzo can get into it and make the lesson to be edifying. But I want to make a quick comment real quick before I actually get into the lesson. As you see before you, there's a lesson that the Spirit had me do earlier. There should be markers in the last time. Well, there was a brother on the comment board that asked a question, and I perceived this question wrong, and I answered him, the way I answered him, because I perceived the question that he asked me wrong. He said, "Shalom, brother, who are the 7 heads?" And I didn't really pay attention to what video it was, so I'm thinking he's talking about the top 7 back in the days from the old school. At One West, that was the first thing that came to mind. And I told him that goes back to the days of the school in Harlem. You wouldn't know who they were. So he comes back and say, "Oh, okay, I get it. So we wouldn't know who the 7 heads are?" He says, or do you know? My apologies, brother. I just want understanding. So I told him, it doesn't concern you, bro. Don't worry about it. Because the whole time I'm going back and forth with the brother, I'm thinking that he's trying to inquire about the 7 heads, which I told him he wouldn't know who they are. But the Spirit had me look at it again. He said, "Oh, he's talking," because I realized what video it was on, and he said he's talking about the 7 heads as far as the beast is concerned. That's why he said, or do you know? My apologies, brother. I just want understanding. So I said, it doesn't concern you, bro. Don't worry about it. But then when I realized what he said, I said, "Salaki, bro, I thought you were asking about the top 7 in the school before. My apology." So I put Greeks, Romans, Spanish, French, Germania Major, Germania Minor, and the British. So these are the 7 heads in the book of Revelation, the 7 heads and 10 horns. These are the 7 heads, which the upstart in this lesson that I did, through the Spirit, based off of a lesson that the brother Karatazar from Vegas did. They said they mentioned Russia, and then they're saying that the mark of the beast is not the microchip, blah, 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 whatever. So I'm like, where the hell these guys come from, first and foremost? And second of all, where did you learn all this other stuff from? You didn't get that on your own. You didn't pick up the Bible, start reading, and start talking about the 7 heads being certain European countries. And that gave it away already. But even when they said Russia, that's a dead giveaway even more, because that was an old breakdown. And Russia is not a part of the 7 heads. The only part that Russia has to play with the beast is that's going to be one of the major forces to destroy the beast, along with their allies and the allies of America. So without further ado, to get into the lesson itself, this is from a lesson Spirit had me do, was it January 13th, which is a couple of days ago, called Debate, with a bunch of question marks. And the brother came on here, GMSInfoDoc, or Frequently Asked Questions, said, "Shalom, Apostle Yahweh, B'Shem Al-Shai, B'Shem Rachakodash, Barakatah. If it's not too much to ask, could you do one going over the circumcision and the uncircumcision, Babakusha?" And I replied to him, "Shalom, Khan, Lord's will." So, in this lesson, we're going to go into it earlier this morning. A couple of precepts came to mind, so I jotted down, looked over a couple of them. I try to make this lesson concise, just for the sake of giving the understanding of what circumcision and uncircumcision is. Circumcision, you could use it twofold, meaning circumcision is actually getting circumcised, taking the foreskin on the penis the 8th day of when the baby's born and circumcising it. And also circumcision represents those that had the law. Okay, the law is also a representation of circumcision. The uncircumcision are those that didn't circumcise their children, that pretty much all their life were Israelites and didn't get circumcised. And also that being uncircumcised comes from the lack of knowing the law, and the circumcision of the law. So they will be known or classified as uncircumcision, as they were called by the Jews in Jerusalem. So these were Israelites that were being called uncircumcised or heathen or Gentiles by the Israelites in Israel and the surrounding areas that kept the laws, statutes, and commandments. And that's the short of it all. That's the simple and quick, fast track understanding. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the book of Leviticus, the 20th chapter first. And when you read Leviticus 20 from the first verse on down, it pretty much speaks about not to send your children through the fire to Molech. It speaks about different perverted sexual acts. It speaks about adultery. It speaks about sleeping with your near kin. It speaks about sodomy. It speaks about bestiality. And these were all the things that the Lord is saying don't do. It's speaking about also dealing with those with familiar spirits and wizards and witches and all that. And this is what the people or the inhabitants of the land of Canaan, which is what it was called prior to our forefathers getting in there and changing it to the land of Israel. This is what they were doing in their land, and this is the reason why the Lord was going to kick them out, which goes back even further than that. During the time of Noah, his son Ham, which his son Cain, which was his firstborn, he was the one that was in that land prior to us getting in there. And the Lord through Noah cursed Canaan for looking upon their father's nakedness. So he cursed them, and this is why we were justified in taking that land, and they were committing all these heinous acts in that land. So when we get down to the 22nd verse, right, it says, "You shall therefore keep all my statutes and all my judgments and do them." Why? Because these laws, statutes, commandments that the Lord gave to Moses to give to the nation of Israel was a guideline to separate us and make us holy from the other nations. So the Lord said, keep this. It says that the land whither I bring you to dwell therein, spew you not out. Why? Because if you don't, what's going to happen? The Lord is going to kick us out of that land. So it says, "And you shall not walk in the manners of the nation which I cast out before you, for they committed all these things, and therefore I abhorred them." And for you to understand what this means, I cast them out before them for they committed all these things. You will have to go back to the first verse and read on down to the 21st verse, and that'll give you the whole list, of the things they were doing. It says, "But I have said unto you, you shall inherit their land, and I will give it unto you to possess it, a land that floweth with milk and honey. I am the Lord your power, which have separated you from other people." And what separated us? The laws, statutes, and commandments, which made us holy, separate, above all these people, special, peculiar, above all these nations that were around, because the Lord never gave them the laws. Although certain nations kept certain things of the oral law, because the law was oral before it was written down, in stone and in parchment later on. It was oral, and there were certain nations that were keeping certain things, but they were never given the contract, of the law, statutes, and commandments signed in blood. So it says, you shall therefore put difference between clean beasts and unclean. Why? Because if you don't put difference between clean and unclean, which the Lord gives a list in Leviticus 11 chapter, I believe that's Deuteronomy 5, if I'm not mistaken, or 14. I don't remember exactly which one, but pretty much this was a dietary law, because the law, when you look at it, is broken down into 4 groups, and I remember this easily because the individual that was in the school years ago, he said, just remember, if you want to understand the laws or understand the breakdown of the 4 groupings of the law, just remember MCDC. M, moral; C, civil; D, dietary; C, ceremonial. Moral, civil, dietary, ceremonial. And that's how the law is broken down into those 4 categories. So that's why we were supposed to put a difference between the clean and unclean. And that's why the Lord gave us a detailed list of the things we could and could not eat. Why? So that we would not become abominable. Because when we become abominable, what happens? We end up like those heathens. Therefore we become what? Uncircumcised. And between unclean fowls and clean, and you shall not make your souls abominable by beast or by fowl or by any manner of living thing that creepeth on the ground, which I have separated from you as unclean. See? And it spoke about sexual depravities. It spoke about, not bowing down to idols, not sacrificing your children to Molech, not eating certain abominable foods, because all these things would make us to become uncircumcised. And you shall be holy unto me, for I the Lord am holy, and have severed you from other people, that you should be mine. All right? So with that understanding, moving on to the next precept in Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, these were curses that came upon us. Deuteronomy 28 and 63, right? It says, and it shall come to pass that as the Lord rejoiced over you to do you good and to multiply you, so the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you and to bring you to naught, and you shall be plucked from off the land whither thou goest to possess it, if we didn't do what? If we didn't keep his laws, statutes, and commandments. And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other. And what happens when we get scattered among them? Just like the Lord said, make sure, take heed that you don't do according to the manners of these nations. And it says, and there, in wherever you spread out, wherever you're at among these nations around the world, thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. Because it tells us in Deuteronomy, the 32nd chapter, that any new god comes up, Jake is there worshiping him. It says the other nations do not change their gods, but Jake changes their power for every other thing out there that is not beneficial. And this is where the uncircumcision came into play, from being circumcised. So now let's go from there to the book of Hosea, the 1st chapter, and we're going to start at the 6th verse. It says, and she, meaning Hosea's wife, which was a harlot, for those of you that have a problem with harlots, and she conceived again and bare a daughter, and the Most High said unto Hosea, call her name Leruhamah, which the word Leruhamah is La'ah-Rachama, if I'm not mistaken, which is Rachama, or is a feminine way of saying Racham, which means mercy. La'ah-Rachama, not mercy, or not having obtained mercy. For I will no more have mercy upon the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away. See, and the first of the kingdoms to fall to these nations, and that those curses in Deuteronomy 28 fell upon, was the kingdom of Israel, the northern kingdom, that fell to the Assyrians. All right, but this applies now to all of Israel that fell away, because we all fell away. Even the Apostle Paul quoted Psalms that none doeth good, no, not one. It says, but I will have mercy upon the house of Judah. And this is one of the reasons why the Jews in Jerusalem, which primarily comprised of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, and some of the sprinkle of the other tribes that stayed, were considered to be separated from the other Israelites that fell away and started committing abominations. Because of scriptures like this, scriptures in the book of 2 Kings 17, where it says only the tribe of Judah remained, but eventually Judah fell also. All right, so it says, but I will have mercy upon the house of Judah, and will save them by the Lord their power, and will not save them by bow, nor by sword, nor by battle, by horses, nor by horsemen, because eventually we all fell, and the Lord had to come back and deliver us, right? So it says, now when she had weaned Leruhamah, she conceived and bare a son. Then said the Most High, call his name Lo Ami, which the word or the name Lo Ami, La'a Ain Yah, means not my people. For you are not my people, and I will not be your power. So if we were not the people of the Lord, what did we become? We became heathens, because the Lord stripped us of the very thing that he gave us to separate us from these nations. So he kicked us out, put the curses upon us. And what did we do? Wandering from hill to mountain, from one government to another government, from one nation to another nation. And we were doing what? Worshipping their idols. So it says, yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, you are not my people, there shall be said unto them, you are the sons of the living power. Why? Because the Most High made an oath, a promise and an oath to Abraham, that he would set up his seed after him. So the Most High is a keeper of his word. So the Lord had mercy on the whole nation eventually. And this is why Yahushua came on the scene, to take away that sin that was there, that was embedded, that nothing else could take away but the precious blood of Yahushua. All right, so now let's go from there. Let's go to the book of Habakkuk. So when you go back into the history of the division of the kingdom of Israel, you'll start to get a little bit more understanding as to why the Jews or the southern kingdom put a distinction or a wall, so to speak, between themselves and the other Israelites. Because we got to remember, they understood the history. It's not like today. When you open up the Bible, these plantation Christians open up the Bible, they see that the Gentiles can be saved, or the Greeks, they're automatically thinking about Esau and other nations. It wasn't like that in the past. Our forefathers, they knew the history. They were keen to the history. They knew what happened to us. They knew that we went from nation to nation, that we fell, that we were worshiping their idols, that we became uncircumcised. They'd understood that. And when they said circumcision, or heathen or Gentile, they knew exactly what they were saying. They were saying that these Israelites that fell away are acting just like these other nations. And this is why the Apostle Paul made this statement, before I read this, in the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 12 and 2. It says, you know that you were Gentiles, past tense, carried away unto these dumb idols, even as you were led, because this is what made you uncircumcised, by following after these other gods that are not gods. Okay, so going back to Habakkuk 1 and 5, behold ye among the heathen, and regard and wonder marvelously, for I will work a work in your days which you will not believe, though it be told you. Why? Because these same Israelites that fell away were going to be brought back to the fold, because the Lord had to build back the nation of Israel as he promised, because his name rides on it. So the elect that fell away at one time were going to be brought back. That's why he told Elijah that I have reserved to myself 7,000 men that have not bowed the knee to Baal. So although we all fell away at one time, the elect were going to be able to be brought back, because they were sealed from the beginning. Now let's go from there to the book of Deuteronomy, the 10th chapter and the 12th verse. It reads, and now Israel, what doth the Lord thy power require of thee, but to fear the Lord Yahweh Bashem Shai thy power, to walk in all his ways, and to love him, and to serve the Lord thy power with all thy heart and with all thy soul. Meaning what? Not turning away to these idols. So it says, to keep the commandments of the Lord Yahweh Bashem Shai and his statutes, which I command thee this day for thy good. Behold, the heaven and the heaven of heavens is the Lord's thy power, the earth also with all that therein is. Only the Lord Yahweh Bashem Shai had a delight in thy fathers to love them, and this is why he gave us the laws, statutes, commandments that are written down in stone, cemented by the blood of these particular animals that the Lord set up to cement the contract between himself and us. And he chose their seed after them, even you above all people, as it is this day, because no other nation were given the laws, statutes, and commandments of the Lord, the Most High Yahweh. And it says, circumcise therefore what? The foreskin of your heart, and be no more stiff-necked, because that stiff-neckedness is what led us to be what? Become Gentiles. You know that you were Gentiles, carried away into these dumb idols, even as you were led. You know, and if you understand that history, you know, and if you're part of the elect, you'll start to understand why, when we read in the New Testament, it speaks about nations being saved, the Gentiles and the Greeks and the heathen, because you understand that those are Israelites coming back out of that state. And this is the vision that Cornelius had when he saw the sheet let down to the four corners of the earth with all manner of unclean beasts. And the Lord told him, rise, Peter, kill and eat. And he said, not so, Lord, for nothing unclean has entered into my mouth. And he said, what the Lord cleansed, that called out not common nor unclean. And the so-called Christians in the churches take that to justify themselves being able to eat any abomination. Mainly that goddamn pig, which the pig has their job on the earth. There's nothing wrong with a pig because they have their job to do, but they're unclean, so we can't eat that. Just like we can't eat other unclean animals, but they have their purpose on the earth. You know? But what that dream or that vision represented, as you read further down, the Lord, Peter came to the understanding, because it came to him 3 times, because he even said, the Lord has told me that I should call no man common or unclean. It was talking about the Israelites that were in that unclean, uncircumcised, heathenistic, Gentile, Greek mentality. That's what that dream represented, that vision represented. So it says, going back to Deuteronomy 10:16, it says, circumcise therefore the foreskin of your heart, and be no more stiff-necked. Now, let's go from there to the book of Romans. Romans chapter 2 and verse 25. And if you can't get it after this, you know, and after all these different lessons that have been done, then it's not meant for you to get it. Either you see it, but you don't want to see it, or the Lord just put blinders on you. Romans 2:25. For circumcision verily profiteth. So who is the circumcision? The Israelites mainly from the southern kingdom that were in Jerusalem, that were calling themselves keeping the law, statutes, and commandments. For circumcision verily profiteth. It profits. It says, if thou keep the law. See? And this is why we can't keep the law perfect. This is why we're rehearsing the righteous acts. Because if you break the law in one point, you're guilty of breaking the whole law. So it's impossible to keep the law. So it says, if circumcision verily profiteth, if thou keep the law, but if thou be a breaker of the law, thy what? Thy circumcision is made uncircumcision. And this is what happened to us. The Lord gave us the law, statutes, and commandments. And what happened? We became uncircumcised when we disobeyed and became stiff-necked. That didn't mean that mathematically, you know, the Israelites were born. The 8th day, the man child was circumcised. He's walking around, and one day at the age of 15, he's walking around. He commits a sin, and all of a sudden, he wakes up the next morning, and a foreskin is back on his penis. You know, and he's wondering where that turtleneck came from. No, man. That's talking about becoming unclean, becoming unholy, as to before you were holy. And this is what happened to all of us as a nation. It says this, therefore, if the uncircumcision, meaning the ones that went off and became in that holy estate, keep the righteousness of the law, shall not their uncircumcision be counted for circumcision? So that's what it is. Because now what's happening is this portion of Israelites that went off are being cleaned up. And that's pretty much what the mystery of the Gentiles is. That's why the Apostle Paul said there's no difference between a Jew or the Greek. Why? Because they're both Israelites. It says, and shall not uncircumcision, which is by nature, if it fulfill the law, judge thee who by the letter in circumcision does transgress the law? Yeah, because you're talking about keep the law, but you ain't keeping the law. Now, let's go from there to the book of 1 Maccabees. And this is why it's so important to understand this part of the history of what happened during the Hellenization period. And if you don't know what the Hellenization period is, type it in and read and learn what was going on back then. The Hellen is a Greek way of saying Greek. All right, and there was a point of time where when the Greek Empire ruled, they were going around the world and mandating and pushing their philosophies on other nations. So when they conquered those nations were forced to keep their laws, keep their way of life, keep all the debaucherous things that they were doing. And that's what happened. It was no different for Israel, because we fell up under that captivity also. So 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 11, in those days went there out of Israel what? Wicked men, who persuaded many. And this is what they did. They said, look, man, and this is what they said, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, for since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. And what happened? They became uncircumcised. Now in this case, as we read further down, and it speaks about the uncircumcised, there was actually a actual custom. It started with the word epi something. I always forget the term. I believe it's a Greek term, and it literally meant to sew the foreskin back on the penis, because back then they were in the gymnasiums buck naked, and the actual heathen would know, no, you're a Jew because you're circumcised, so they actually did that. But when you look at it spiritually also, the Israelites became uncircumcised, as we read in the book of Romans, the 2nd chapter. Okay, it says, so this device pleased them well, because they persuaded many of Israel. Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. See, they were doing everything that these heathen were doing, exercising butt naked, eating pork, putting tattoos on them, shaving their beards off, worshiping their idols, going through their rituals. It says, whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the custom of the heathen, and made themselves what? Uncircumcised. So this is twofold, but this was speaking about them actually sewing the foreskin back on their penis. But they also became uncircumcised, as we read the Apostle Paul said, you know that you were Gentiles, carried away unto these dumb idols, even as you were led. It says, and forsook the holy covenant, and joined themselves to the heathen, and were sold to do mischief. And what happened? Their circumcised hearts became uncircumcised. They were no longer calling themselves Jews. They were no longer giving themselves Hebrew names. They were no longer circumcising their children. They were calling themselves by Greek names. They started learning the Greek language, the Greek tongue, adopted the customs. And in process of time, what do you think is going to happen after a period of time? You're going to forget. Just like we forgot, the great forgetting. So now let's go from there to the book of 2nd Maccabees, the 6th chapter, and the 1st verse. It says, not long after this, the king sent an old man of Athens to compel the Jews to depart from the laws of their fathers, and not to live after the law of the Most High, laws of the Most High. So this is what was happening. The Hellenization was going down. They would send certain officers to make sure that the people that they conquered were doing according to the business of the Greeks, and they even had other Israelites that were helping doing this. So it says, and to pollute also the temple of in Jerusalem, and to call it the temple of Jupiter Olympius, and that in Gerizim of Jupiter, the defender of strangers, as they did desire that dwelt in the place. The coming in of this mischief was sore and grievous to the people, for the temple was filled with riot and reveling by the Gentiles. This talking about the actual Gentiles, the actual nations, who dallied with harlots and had to do with women within the court of the holy places, and besides that brought in things that were not lawful. So they were doing this in the Lord's sanctuary. The altar also was filled with profane things which the law forbiddeth. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep Sabbath days or ancient feasts, or to profess himself at all to be a Jew. So if you couldn't call yourself a Jew, what were you calling yourself? A heathen, a Greek. This is why the Apostle Paul said there is no difference between a Jew and the Greek. Why? Because they are all Israelites. So it says, and in the day of the king's birth, every month, they were brought by bitter constraint to eat of the sacrifices. And when the fast of Bacchus was kept, the Jews were compelled to go in procession to Bacchus carrying ivy. So what they were doing, they were just going totally off. Moreover, there went out a decree to the neighbor cities of the heathen by the suggestion of Ptolemy against the Jews, that they should observe the same fashions and be partakers of their sacrifices. So this thing was spreading. It says, and whoso would not conform themselves to the manners of the Gentiles should what? Should be put to death. Then might a man have seen the present misery. So like it for a minute. Okay, so now let's go from there. Let's go to Romans. Just building on the thing about the circumcision. Romans chapter, not 1, Salakia. Romans chapter 3 and 1. It says, what advantage then hath the Jew, or what profit is there of circumcision? Much every way, chiefly because that unto them were committed the oracles of the Most High. And why was that done? Because the Lord said that the tents of Judah shall be saved first, so that the rest of the tribes will not magnify themselves against Judah, because Judah is the head tribe, the favorite tribe of the Most High. So that's why they were still kept within, because they were the ones that first received salvation. And this is why Yahushua went to them first. See? And then eventually Peter was sent to Cornelius, which was an Israelite. They didn't say what tribe he was from. And then the Apostle Paul was commissioned with going to the Israelite foreigners that were scattered abroad among the Greeks, and among all the other nations, in that region where he visited them at. All right, so now let's go from there. And let's see. Let's go to Ephesians chapter 2. So these the same that were circumcised, the same circumcision, this is what they said. This is Ephesians chapter 2, verse 11. Wherefore remember, this is the Apostle Paul speaking to the Israelites at Ephesus that will call themselves Ephesians, so on and so forth. So he's saying, remember that you being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, because you were uncircumcised. But this is what he said, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands, by those Jews in Jerusalem. That's what you were called, uncircumcised. And that's where that term came from. It didn't mean that they were actual heathen, but they were uncircumcised, like the heathen. You know, both spiritually and physically. But then the Lord moved certain ones of them among the nation of Israel that were in that state, and brought them back to the fold. It says that at that time you were without the Messiah Yahushua, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel. And the commonwealth of Israel only pertains to the nation of Israel. Read Psalms, the 147th chapter, the 19th and the 20th verse, where the Lord only gave his law, statutes, and commandments to the nation of Israel, not to those other nations. And that's where the commonwealth went. It went to the Israelites, who were partakers of that inheritance. It says, and strangers from the covenants of promise. Why? Because you fell away, having no hope and without the Most High in the world. Yeah, because you were out there just like those heathens were, without hope. But the Lord was going to send hope. So this is why, before we read on, let's go now to Amos chapter 9 verse 11. It says, in that day will I raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen. So the tabernacle of David consisted of who? All 12 tribes. So the Lord was going to raise them back up and set them back in order. It says, and close up the breaches there. What are the breaches? The breaches were the differences between the tribes. Them going back and forth, bickering, arguing, you know, what the differences, you know, and the calling the names and the accusations and the finger pointing and all of that. It says, and I will raise up his ruins, because we were ruined, we were destroyed as a people. And I will build it, what? As in the days of old. So the Lord was going to restructure everything back the way it was. And it begins with the knowledge. It begins with repentance. And this is why you had the what? The gospel of reconciliation, which is the good news of those that were being reconciled or brought back into the good graces of the Most High Yahweh through his son Yahushua, the precious blood of the Messiah. And that's the truth of the mystery of the Gentiles, which were Israelite foreigners. So let's go from there to the book of Isaiah, chapter 10. I'm sorry, not chapter 10, chapter 11. And we can start at 10. It says, and in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, which is who? Yahushua, which shall stand for an ensign of the people. To it shall the Gentiles seek, which are the Israelite foreigners, and his rest shall be glorious, because the kingdom of heaven will be glorious. It says, and it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people. Why? Because we were scattered. And when we were scattered, we just read a few precepts here and there of what we were doing in these different captivities, and how we were going off into the worshiping the idols of these other nations, which shall be left from where? From Assyria, and from Egypt, and from Pathros, and from Cush, and from Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. And even to this day, where we at? We're all throughout the world. And he shall set up an ensign for the nation. The ensign is Yahushua, this knowledge, this word that brings us back to redemption, reconciliation with our power Yahweh through his son Yahushua. And shall assemble the outcasts of Israel. Why? Because we were casted off. It says, and gather together this dispersed of Judah, which goes into the diaspora from the four corners of the earth, because Judah is everywhere, right? And in the midst of all of this, what's going to happen? It says, the envy also of Ephraim shall depart, and the adversaries of Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah shall not vex Ephraim. Why? Because we're going to all be cool. The Lord is going to take away all those differences. He's going to bring back the brotherhood. He's going to bring back that family union Let's go real quick to Zechariah. Zechariah chapter 11 and 14. Then I cut asunder mine other staff, even bands, which the word bands means to bind together, that I might break the brotherhood between Judah and Israel. But we're reading in Isaiah 11 that the Most High is going to do away with that. We read in Amos, the 9th chapter, that the Lord is going to close up the breaches thereof. And that's what was taking place during the time back 2,000 years ago, when the word was being taught back then. First it was taught to the southern kingdom, then the rest of the tribes that were being brought back. And you had some of the southern kingdom that had got caught up into that whole scenario of becoming uncircumcised, into that Greek Hellenization. All right, so now let's go from there back to the book of Hosea 1 and 11 now. Then shall the children of what? Of Judah and the children of Israel be gathered together. That's why we're being gathered together now. Through what? Through the house of David, by the word of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai, and appoint themselves one head, being King David, because Yahushai is the ultimate head over us. Then you have King David as the leader or the head on the earth. It says, and they shall come up out of the land, for great shall be the day of Jezreel. And the word Jezreel, Yah-Zerai Allah, means he is the seed of the power. You know, because these are the ones that the Lord cleaned up and brought back together. And when the kingdom is established, all Israel shall be saved in the long run anyway, because that was a promise the Lord made to Abraham and to his seed. And the nation of Israel, so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians, and wherever they are scattered abroad in the world, no matter what they look like, are all a part of the children of the promise that the Lord said he would make them as a multitude, you know, as the sands of the sea, as the stars of heaven, stars from heaven, which was a metaphor for an innumerable amount of Israelites. All right, now let's go from there back to Ephesians 2, and let's finish out in Ephesians 2 and 13. But now in Yahushai, you who sometimes were far off are made nigh by the blood of Yahushai. And this goes into the book of Daniel, chapter 9, verse 7. O Lord, righteousness belong unto thee, but unto us confusion of faces, as at this day, to the men of Judah and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and unto all Israel, listen good, that are near and that are far off through all the countries whither thou hast driven them, because of their trespass that they have trespassed against thee. So to those that are near in Jerusalem, surrounding areas, and what? That are far off. That's why here Ephesians 2:13, but now in Yahushai, you who sometimes were far off are made nigh by the blood of Yahushai, because that was the agreement. You go off, you break the laws. If you don't become the sacrifice, you sacrifice these particular clean animals or clean fowl to be able to be forgiven, so that you can be restored. It says, for he, Yahushua, is our peace, who hath made both one, and hath broken down the middle wall of partition between us. The middle wall of partition beginning with that middle wall of partition that the Heavenly Father set between himself and us, and also the differences among the tribes. It says, having abolished in his flesh, the enmity, meaning the animosity, even the law of commandments containing ordinances, for to make in himself of two, one new man, so making peace. So this is both the kingdoms coming together as one, because that is the ultimate. And that he might reconcile, the word reconcile is to be brought back into the good graces unto the Most High, both unto the Most High in one body by the cross, having slain the enmity thereby. And he came and preached peace to you which were far off, and to them that were nigh. to both the kingdoms. We just read in Daniel, the 9th chapter, that this was talking about the ones that were near and the ones that were far off among the nations, which were Israelites. For through him, through Yahushua, we both have access by one Spirit unto the Father. And that's what the gospel of reconciliation is, the good news. That's what it pertains to. It says, now therefore you are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of the Most High. Why? Because you are Israelites. And now you're being brought back into the good graces. You're able to partake of that commonwealth once again. It says, and are built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Yahushua himself being the chief cornerstone, because that message that was given by Yahushua to his disciples, who later became apostles, was spread abroad to reconcile the Israelites that knew they were Israelites and the Israelites that didn't know that they were Israelites, that were a part of the elect at that time. In whom all the building fitly framed together groweth unto an holy temple in the Lord, in whom ye also are builded together for an habitation of the power through the Spirit. And this is why the Lord is able to work with the men, to inspire them through the Spirit of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai Bashem Rachakodash to teach this word, to teach the reconciliation. And that's the only reason we have this, because the Lord had mercy upon us. You see? So with that, there's many different directions, you can go with this lesson. Brothers have done many different lessons on the circumcision, the uncircumcision, and that whole history. This is one avenue, but there's so many, because there's so many scriptures on it. So with that, I pray that the brother's question was answered here, GMS FAQ. And I pray that you brothers in the comment board, and sisters have been edified. And to the next time I say Shalom.
South China Sea alert. World War III fears. Beijing launches terrifying military drills. China has recently launched a new training to test to measure the readiness of their air force. Video footage of Beijing's latest training exercise has been released and was published on the state-owned New China TV YouTube channel. The Chinese Air Force carried out the training exercise to ensure their pilots remain vigilant in the event they need to be deployed. The training included low-altitude sea defense penetration, live ammunition discharge, and airborne assaults. The exercise was specifically called to help evaluate their soldiers' maritime combat and assault operation capabilities. The video of the exercise showcased multiple military helicopters flying in formation and eliminating targets. These targets were fired at with live ammunition, with some targets being on land and others at sea. Soldiers were also recorded jumping out of helicopters and using a rope to descend to the ground. This comes as tensions remain high in the South China Sea between the Communist state and the U.S. The increase in patrols in the region has sparked fears that an accidental collision could result in subsequent skirmishes. However, the main concern is China's military island bases, which have runways, hangars, control towers, and helipads. In August last year, Chinese forces launched 4 missiles into the disputed waters of the South China Sea. After this incident, the Pentagon issued a statement that said China's actions stand in contrast to its pledge to not militarize the South China Sea and are in contrast to the United States' vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific region. A vision in which all nations, large and small, are secure in their sovereignty, free from coercion, and able to pursue economic growth consistent with accepted international rules and norms. In recent weeks, China has also been expanding its naval bases in the South China Sea region.
These moves remain closely watched by the U.S. in case of preparation for conflict. China's Navy has expanded Yulin Naval Base on the island province of Hainan. The naval base is currently a conventional submarine facility. Military news database globalsecurity.org said that intelligence had found 4 new trestles for submarines, each 229 meters long, that can accommodate 16 submarines. China has shared footage of troops carrying out a simulated invasion of Taiwan after President Xi Jinping ordered his military to be prepared for war at all times. Soldiers used live weapons in the mock takeover of an unnamed island in China's Fujian province, 214 miles away from Taiwan. Footage released by state media outlet CCTV showed Chinese helicopters fire missiles at the landmass, while People's Liberation Army (PLA) troops fired machine guns at water targets. Footage of the Chinese military drill, said to have taken place recently, was released this week after Mr. Xi told his force to be on high alert at all times. Helicopters were instructed to fly 66 feet above sea level to launch precise strikes against ground targets. Ground targets set up on Minnan, mainland China's closest point to Taiwan, were obliterated by Chinese missiles as troops practiced drooping from the aircrafts onto the land below. CCTV did not state whether the drills were related to Taiwan. China carried out a simulated invasion on Taiwan during the country's National Day holiday last year. A CCTV report at the time explained how Chinese forces moved in from multiple locations onto an island neighboring the Taiwan Straits. It added, the exercise, with the effective integration of multiple new combat forces, increased the actual combat capability of the troops in joint landing and three-dimensional assault. Zhu Fenglian, spokesperson at the Taiwan Affairs Office in Beijing, also issued a chilling warning during the drills and said, Taiwan independence is a dead end, while confrontation will lead to nowhere. It comes after Mr. Xi commanded PLA forces to train in real combat conditions at the start of the year. In a statement published to the Chinese Military Commission website, the president issued an order to troops to be ready for a real war scenario. The order said, training under real combat conditions must be deepened and all military training should be war-centered and conducive to improving combat effectiveness, and the research on warfare and combat-related issues should be enhanced. It also asked forces to strengthen confrontational training under real war scenario, hone the troops in the front line of military struggle, and promote the in-depth combination and integration of military training and operations, ensuring combat readiness all the time and operational capability at any time. Chinese forces are said to have jumped into action after getting the order from Mr. Xi. Mr. Xi also called on troops to put all their minds and energy on preparing for war in a visit to a military base in October. After inspecting the People's Liberation Army Marine Corps in Chaozhou City, Xinhua, Mr. Xi told soldiers to maintain a state of high alert and called on them to be absolutely loyal, absolutely pure, and absolutely reliable. Later in November, the president urged his troops not to fear death and to get ready to win wars in an address to military commanders. Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen met with Kelly Craft, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, virtually this week. Ms. Craft, who was scheduled to visit Taipei in person before the trip was canceled, told Ms. Tsai the United States will always stand with Taiwan. Beijing was outraged by the meeting, posting on China's mission to the UN Twitter account, the United States should understand that the attempt to challenge the One China principle receives no support and is doomed to fail. Under President Donald Trump, the U.S. has ramped up diplomatic relations with Taiwan and sold $5.861 billion worth of weapons systems to the country in 2020.
Top U.S. and United Kingdom defense officials signed an agreement this week to merge some military forces in 2021 to form a combined carrier strike group. Marine Corps F-35B Joint Strike Fighter aircraft and the Navy destroyer the Sullivans will deploy as part of the strike group, former Acting Defense Secretary Christopher Miller announced Monday. The UK-US Combined Strike Group will be led by the UK aircraft carrier Queen Elizabeth. The agreement was signed by Miller and UK Secretary of State for Defence Ben Wallace. The strike group is scheduled to sail out of Portsmouth, UK, later this year. This deployment underscores the strength of our bilateral ties and demonstrates US-UK interoperability, both of which are key tenets of the U.S. National Defense Strategy, the Pentagon's announcement on the agreement states. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said in November that the task force will operate in the Mediterranean Sea, Indian Ocean and East Asia. Next year, HMS Queen Elizabeth will lead a British and Allied task group on our most ambitious deployment for 2 decades, he said. We shall forward deploy more of our naval assets in the world's most important regions, protecting the shipping lanes that supply our nation. 10 Marine F-35B Lightning II fighter jets embarked on the Queen Elizabeth in September as part of a training deployment. The embark was in preparation for this year's full-length deployment, Marine officials said last year. A Marine Corps F-35B Joint Strike Fighter Squadron will make history by deploying aboard the British Royal Navy's newest aircraft carrier, the first deployment of its kind and one that could serve as a model for the new normal, Lieutenant General Stephen Rudder said. Members of a Marine F-35B squadron are preparing to deploy on the aircraft carrier Queen Elizabeth in 2021. The deployment has long been in the works, Lieutenant General Stephen Rudder, head of Marine Corps Aviation, said at the annual Sea Airspace Conference just outside Washington, D.C. Lieutenant General Stephen Rudder, the former head of Marine Corps Aviation, said in 2019 that the F-35 embark would serve as a new norm for how the U.S. will conduct operations with maritime partners. Wallace said the deployment embodies the strength of bilateral ties between the U.S. and UK, and reflects the depth of the vital defense and security partnership. I am delighted that the UK now possesses a 21st-century carrier strike capability, which has been greatly assisted by the unswerving support and cooperation of the United States at all levels over the past decade, he said.